Hello, everyone. Uh, Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon. A very warm welcome in today's webinar. And I mean literally a warm welcome because it's freezing cold out here in the north of India. It feels like it might snow anytime in Delhi now. Let's get the webinar started. I'm really excited for today's webinar because it's been a while that we did our last one, and it's not our fault. The CS people are so hard to catch. They're so busy. Today we are going to be talking about how to track product outcomes for product outcome metrics for HR tech. We are going to be talking about how to identify desired outcomes, how to create customer focused personas, how to establish jobs to be done for each persona, finding product outcomes, and finally, how to measure and track these product outcomes. And to discuss on this topic, we have Mausmi Ambastha, who is the co-founder of ZapScale. Mausmi is a two-time founder who built, scaled, and sold her first startup, ThreatSol, a few years back, and is now working towards building ZapScale with a mission to make customer success 10 times easier for B2B SaaS organizations. She is a skilled professional in business planning, customer success, and operations. Our special guest for today is Amol Pawar, one of the most enthusiastic and passionate people I know in the industry. Amol brings more than 20 years of global experience in HR tech, entrepreneurship, and consulting. As the founder consultant of Nuest Consulting, he's focused on HR tech and growth consulting. Amol is based in Pune, India, and is keen to learn new stuff while productizing services for scale. And needless to say, he's very passionate about HR tech, organizational development, and scaling up. Amol, thanks for being with us today. And I cannot wait for you both to take over this discussion. But I would just like to cover a few things so the audience know how to interact in today's session. Please feel free to ask questions during the webinar from our panelists. Remember, it's not a speech. We are trying to have a conversation. You can type in your questions into the Q&A box in the Zoom control panel. If you have anything else to say, please type it in the chat box. If you'd prefer speaking than asking questions via text, please raise your hands and I will allow you to speak and ask the questions from the panelists directly. One more tiny thing, this webinar is being recorded. So if you do miss any part of the webinar, please, you can feel free and watch it again on the ZapScale YouTube channel. I will put the channel link in the chat box shortly. Now, enough of me. Let's get the professionals to the stage. Amol and Mausmi, over to you.
Thank you, Shivam. Thanks a lot for an elaborate introduction. Thanks, Amol, for joining us on the webinar. So now just let me tell a little bit to the audience. Me and Amol, we've been talking for a while and we wanted to do something in a webinar which would have value for HR tech, especially as a vertical, and the customer success teams who work in HR tech and help HR companies become successful. Now, that is a very specific, narrow field. But we realized, and especially, we were thinking it's more important to bring valuable content to a very specific audience rather than just talk in general. So the entire webinar is about digging deep into customer outcomes, product outcomes, specifically for HR verticals, so that the people who are attending or who would hear the webinar eventually know exactly who this is for and what value it is going to bring. So if you are working in customer success and handling HR tech in your company, or you are working in another HR tech company, deploying solutions to other companies, this is something which is going to be very valuable to you in your day-to-day life. So over to Amol. We'll just start with product outcome metrics. Amol, would you like to add something here?
Yes. Good evening to everyone, and thanks to the ZapScale team for trusting me with this. On disclaimer, what we are going to talk about here is what we have done so far, or what I have learned by doing, and more often than failing in doing something and then trying certain things out. So we are also looking to learn from all of you. So maybe one request is, if you have any specific expectations from this webinar, because you've decided to invest 1 hour of your time, maybe you could put those in the chat window, and then we'll try and cover those up as we go through. We of course have an defined agenda to this, and we will talk about certain aspects. And like Mausmi said, we've designed this to make it fairly practical things, something that, like I said, that we've tried and done in the past, and we want you to take those and see if those apply to your environment. So yeah, with that, I think let's get started in terms of what is product metrics and outcomes and all of those aspects. So let's get started.
Awesome, awesome, Amol. So, we all talk about customer success and how to measure and how to track. And almost everybody knows the basics, right? You have to track how much time the customer is spending on the platform, how many logins they have made, is everybody using it, which features are they using. And then, of course, you do those surveys asking, feedback that are you happy, are you unhappy? And maybe if you would refer me, so NPS, CSAT, these are standards. But there is more beyond that. So there's a concept, and this is not something I have developed, so let me be very clear. This concept was actually introduced by, I think, Nick Mehta in one of his podcasts. Okay, so customer success is a combination of customer outcomes and customer experiences. So it looks so simple. Why does a customer come to you? Because they want results, and they also want to enjoy the relationship that happens between the two. And this is something we would like to really dig down a bit, and then of course dig down into customer outcomes and how to derive into product outcomes. And Amol is going to take us in this journey. So Amol, would you like to take this forward here? Yeah.
Yes. So I think for those of you who are looking at this for the first time, this is, like Mausmi said, this is fairly simple and intuitive. If you look at, I think most customers are looking for a SaaS product or any tech product because they're wanting to solve certain problem, which is what the customer outcomes part of it talks about. And how well you are able to solve that problem or the perceived problem, or the stated or the unstated set of problems, or the problems I stated yesterday versus the problem that I'm stating today. All of that is covered here, right? And of course, as I am doing that, what is the experience that I'm getting in doing this? So very simple example is, the most of the times what I have seen in my experience of dealing with SaaS companies is the onboarding experience, right? One of the biggest thing in typical onboarding process in an HR tech context would be data migration. And it's a painful process, to say the least, because I would have my data in format A, whereas if I'm shifting to your product, then you would ask all of that data in format B. Now, very few companies have even actually thought about this as a problem and tried to solve that, right? And that's where then the experience piece comes into picture. And I can go on, and we could just talk about just for 1 hour, just keeping this one slide there. But essentially what you see on the slide is you have to have a balance of the two. You can't be just giving a great experience, but not solving my problems. You can't be also just great at solving my problems, but giving a very bad experience in doing that. So it's a easier said than done. Having been on the other side of the table, I understand it's a tough thing to do. But as CS professionals, I think it's our job and our duty to continue to identify such opportunities and work with internal stakeholders, which actually cuts across the entire organization to ensure that these things are taken care of. So yeah, I think we can move on if there's something more to be added.
Me and Amol, we have worked together a framework. So we'll go through the framework first, and then we'll apply that framework on one of the HR modules. And then in the third step, we will work in another module together, right? To see how simple the way it has turned out to be. And I was amazed the way it is worked out and the way whole setup that Amol has done. It was amazing. So let's take the first step. The first step is customer outcomes. Now, how do you define those, Amol?
Yeah, so I think customer outcomes, like I said, is what we have to seek is what is the problem that the customer is looking to solve, and how would they know that it is solved? And there are some examples that you can see on the screen. but they want a specific thing, and they might be looking at, they might be saying something. So, for example, in an HR tech context, I might be saying that, hey, you know what, I want to digitize my payroll. Now, but when you actually start understanding what is the business that the customer is in, how are they currently doing payroll, then you would actually start understand what are the specific outcomes that they want from that particular process. And I think we'll talk about this in more detail when we look at specific examples from an HR tech perspective in the subsequent slides as we go along. But I think as a CS professional, I think it's many a times we miss this, especially when the customer is with us at the onboarding stage or even post onboarding. We don't really engage with them in this conversation. And for this, essentially, two or three things are required. One, a very curious mind. Two, an ability to understand the customer's perspective, being able to put yourself in the customer's shoes. And three, having some understanding or showing some inclination to understand their business, their domain, their industry. If you put a little bit of effort, and I think for all of these three things with chat GPTs and the web resources to our disposal, I think anywhere between 30 to 60 minutes is enough for one customer, and this is a one-time effort that you would do, and it will go on a long way. So understanding what specific outcomes, problems that the customer is looking to solve will lead you to the next thing, because it changes. And that's where I think outcomes by personas comes into picture.
So that's something that you've said twice, and I think that is very important to note, that outcome are not static, right? So when you start a journey with a customer, you can understand that early days they may have certain outcome expectation. However, you need to keep checking back because it changes over time. And you already said that twice, so I thought, we really need to dig deep a little bit at that.
Yep, absolutely right. They do evolve. Customer needs would change, just like our needs have changed. And
of course,
expecting that the problem that I solved yesterday is still valid is the biggest mistake that you could do.
So
and then the second part, I think, like I was saying, is that is the role that the person is playing, because the person would also the person himself or herself would change. The role that the person is performing would change, and understanding those different roles that interact with your application is also equally important. That's what brings us to the next step, which is understanding those personas.
So understanding first, the first step that Amol explained is understand what the customer really needs, not what they are saying, but what they really need. Spend some time with them, find that out. And then the next step is, okay, who that person is in that business. What is their persona?
Yeah, and I think this slide gives you a framework from a very simplistic perspective, and we've tried to keep this as simple as possible. So even if you look at it from a three perspectives, and any application would any application or any specific module within HR tech, you could apply this to understand who these three different personas are. They might be three different individuals, or they might be the same individual but performing these three different roles, right? If I were to give you a very similar example, let's say if you are in a toy shop. Now the toy is per se designed to be played by a kid, so the kid is going to be the user. The influencer could be other kids or senior kids, but the buyer is going to be
the parent,
right?
Yes.
And in that sense, understanding hence how do I sort of pitch this and what expectations each of these people would have from the product that I'm producing goes in a long way of ensuring that your products stay relevant. Like for example, Lego. Now, Lego is something that I desired to have as a kid. It's something that is also a favorite toy for my kids today, as well as even for me, today as even as a business resource. So it really goes a long way in terms of creating that stickiness that all businesses are looking to build with their customers.
So, moving on from customer persona to the next framework, which is once you have identified people, you need to identify what are the jobs that these three people or people, each individual does. What is it that they really want to achieve? And it's a very old framework, which was, as far as I remember, Amol, was regularly used with product understanding and trying to understand deeper customer needs as to exactly what they want to use this for. And it an example comes to mind where, and it's a very old example, it's nothing new, that if you're buying a drill machine, you're not buying a machine, you basically are buying a hole in the wall, right? You want to get a hole, but you would go and talk about drill machines. So it's important for the company who's selling drill to understand what do they want to do with it, and that's the job to be done, actually, in a very simple way.
Yeah, actually, just taking a clue from there, Moshmi and the rest of the guys on the call. If you actually look at this, what we are talking about is not new, guys. Okay, this is something that I think companies which have built products in the past and continue to build products, which all of us use. These frameworks have been used and are very much valid for any particular product that you are looking to build. We're looking to apply these in the B2B SaaS environment. And I think that's what we are proposing in this webinar, that look at this as a methodology. We've tried to keep it very, very simple. Like Moshmi said, it's not something that we've invented, but we've just put this together in a way that we feel makes sense for somebody to understand it from a B2B SaaS CS perspective. Now, and I'm really trying hard to not give you real HR tech examples, because we have a couple of them
Yes,
coming
of
up
course, of
today.
course.
So just hold on to that. But I'll come to those specific examples. Now, again, we've already talked about what are the outcomes, what is the person. Now, hence, the next question is, okay, so by having this tool, because at the end of the day, the tech is a tool, like Moshmi said, that it's a drill machine, it's a tool that I'm doing. But hence, what is the specific job that I want to do? And hence, is the tool designed to help me do the job well? Is the tool easy for me to understand and operate? And all of those things then start to come into picture, right? Now, imagine your onboarding journey, imagine your support journey. I have seen HR tech environments where if there are 100 tickets that are landing on the support desk, anywhere between 50 to 90% of those tickets were about, how do I do this? That's it. And when you actually then distill that down and bring that back to the product, and then figure out that, okay, why is it so difficult for this person to figure this thing out while it is there in the product, then you actually start talking about it. So that's where I think this JTBD framework sort of will help you, and we'll talk about specific examples in subsequent slides.
All right, let's move on. So we have our customer outcomes. How do you do that? How do you find out persona? You have found out JTBT, and let's go to the most important part of it. And then you arrive, and it gives you a very good picture of product outcomes.
Yeah, and this is a landmine, guys, and I understand and I completely empathize with each one of you who have even tried doing this in their respective organizations, or who are doing this in their respective organizations today, right? Because at the end of the day, like I said, it will go back to what the product is doing and not doing so well, and what the product is not doing at all and hence needs to do. And of course, this all goes back to the product team, and you need to have a very, very vocal, voice in the product dev cycle. And I know it's, again, easier said than done. I have been there, and I have gone through all possible scenarios that you can imagine about that interaction. right? But it is an important job that the CS has to do in a product organization, is to tell the product teams as to why this particular functionality is important and why it has to be built in a particular way. Because, and then if you've done these three steps above this, then you would be able to fill that because with a very, very compelling story for your teams to then take you seriously. So uh, it only two things that I have learned, and I have learned it the hardest way possible. Only two things matter when you are bringing this back to your product teams. One is data, and second is how you stitch the story together using data and these insights that you will get through these interactions. There is no other way that I have at least discovered so far. So it's a tough one, but it is something that is absolutely needs to be done. And at least in my experience, and when me and Mausmi were discussing about this particular webinar, we both agreed that this is something that we do have to have. And a lot of times I know that CS professionals also, we struggle to actually get this information. Like some of these matrices that you see on the left hand side, we I don't know how many of you are in that scenario where you even get these metrics from the product team. And a lot of times that's the first level of challenge and the struggle that you have to do, saying that, hey, you know what, I don't even get to see my DAU, a simple metric like that. I don't get to see that. Right. And how do I build that? And what do I then hence take to the product team, and how do I convince them to provide me these matrices so that I can do my job better?
Well, at times these matrices are so very important to actually deliver what the customer is asking. I mean, what do you go and talk in QBR if there are certain metrics that you have to work out? And I think that is the most compelling argument for a product team. And a lot of this is actually tracked in many softwares and HR tech tools, but it's just not represented in the way that you could be able to communicate to your customer.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And I think putting that emphasis on how that communication is so very important, that is the key to be able to make customers successful, of course. And a little bit of understanding on when you know what to measure, how do you make sure it is a standard number so that you can compare properly, right? So that's what me and Amol were discussing, that this is something which is more about the measurement, but it's very important for all of us to understand that it has to be on a certain unit. Now that unit could be anything, like DAU is daily active user, so it's per day, right? Or MAU, monthly active user, it's per month. So accordingly, whatever metrics you decide based on this framework, it has to be a unit of measure so that two different customers can be compared with that metric and it does not skew the data in. And this is a very interesting way, the way Amol would take us deeper and is really excited about the HR metrics and how he has put this together.
Yeah, and I think on matrices, I'll talk about actually the DAU, MAU as a metrics, because when I started off in the B2B SaaS environment, I was told that these are the holy grail matrices. But then what I realized is it may not be the metric for you to track, right? Because let's say if I'm doing I'm selling a payroll software. Right? What is the purpose of a payroll software? If I go back to those 3-4 steps, basically, if when I look at it from a customer outcome perspective, or when I look at it from a persona perspective, it's an application that most employees would not look at. I mean, as an employee, I may not even log into the application to download my payslip, as long as the money that has come into my bank is same as last month or more than last month. Right?
More is always preferred.
Only in the scenario that it is lesser than last month is when I'm going to go and check why, and that's when I'm going to need the salary slip. Other scenario as an employee I would log in is only when I need to download those salary slips for any such purposes, like I'm applying for a loan or anything like that. But a payroll admin also may not log into my system on a daily basis. He or she is likely to log into the system only for a specific duration of time within a particular period. And same goes for the business leaders or the HR leaders. And hence, but contrast that to, let's say, if my software is doing attendance, then the daily active users might be a relevant metric for me to track. But just going beyond DAU, if I just go and tell my customer, hey, you know what, you're using my attendance software and I've got 70% or 80% DAU. What I need to tell the customer is that how is that changing over a period of time? What are the reasons for which it is changing? And which set of people have not even logged in once? Then that becomes a very, very
More important.
important aspect. And of course, we'll talk about attendance in more detail, and I'll share more examples in a while about that.
So that's a very interesting finer point is, what happens is most places people just spit out metrics. But it's very important to put the context around that metrics. Yes, DA is important, but not in every context, right? And that is what is very important to understand the framework and then devise what metrics works for me or this particular module, rather than just applying it like a blind slate on everything. And therefore, this is very, very contextual. And what we are basically trying to do is help you derive your own context.
And a lot of times, I think, Mausmi, what we do is we start at this bottom, right?
Yes.
What I love about this framework,
it gives a base, basically.
What I
Yes.
love about this framework is that the metrics is at the bottom, right? And that's where most of us start. We say that, okay, what is the metric that I want to give? Because I want to do a QBR, I want to do an MBR, and I know that metrics are important. So I start there. But then I actually do not trace it back to these earlier 4 steps and validate that with that. Saying that, okay, if I present this metrics, which outcome am I conveying?
Correct.
What job is that metric then conveying that is important to which persona, and it is linked to what is the larger objective or outcome that the customer is desiring to achieve.
Perfect.
If you even if you track this backwards, you need not start with customer outcomes. You can start with a metric and say that, okay, in my product today, I have an ability to give 5 metrics to the customer. All right, great. Now let me just trace these 5 metrics back in this manner and see which of those are relevant and which of those are just there. They don't do anything, right? They don't tell me anything.
Awesome. From that point, we move forward. Now we have sort of covered our framework. So now it's time to test it on the road. Now, the road that we are choosing to test is just one module, because I think it's very important. And that we were discussing and trying to figure it out, we discussed it's very important to keep it very sharp and keep that context right and keep the context simple, so it's easy for everyone to understand. So we all go to our offices and we all have to make attendance. It's a very simple module to understand. We know what this module is for and what it does. It's a basic module. It's there in every business. Everybody does that. School, even in school, we have done this. We know what it is. So now Amol will take us through the framework and how he has applied the entire framework over the attendance module. Here you go, Amol, and please let me know when you want me to change the slide.
Sure, Mausmi. And let me tell you, I think we have a bunch of people from the HR tech industry. It is a misconception that leave and attendance is the most simple module. It is the most critical and it is the most complex module that there can be. And that's why it's interesting for when I had to look at it from this perspective and I had to recreate some of these things. It was very, very interesting for me, and I hope what we are going to present to you is of value to you. And please feel free to add any comments, any thoughts that you guys have on the chat window, and we'll pick them up. If there are any questions that you have, please feel free to add them to the chat as well. So essentially, again, when we look at a customer outcome and why companies are looking at implementing technology for leave and attendance, is essentially to automate and digitize a process that has been manual for many, many years. And increasingly post-pandemic, we're seeing a drive for digitization and automation of these processes. There has been traditionally a lot of manual intervention in this, which is prone for a lot of not so right practices that people could do, and that's also something that they want to avoid. Of course, manual process is prone to manual errors, and that's something that because this goes directly as an input to payroll, it has a very, very direct financial impact on any business, and hence you would be able to actually track the dollars back in terms of investment onto this, right? So those are some of the objectives or outcomes that a customer which is looking to implement a simple module or a complex module like a leave and attendance is looking to achieve, right? Now, when we look at this from a persona perspective, and Mausmi, if you could go to the next one.
Sure.
So who are these people, right? So of course, there is a head of HR, there is a HR team member, and there are employees. Now, from an employee perspective, a lot of times I've seen that many HR tech companies have not, and I'm starting at the bottom, I'm starting with employees, because many a times we've seen that HR tech companies actually design the application from a perspective of the middle, the HR team member, which is supposed to use. And a lot of emphasis is given on how do I simplify and digitize that part of the process. But the HR head and the employee related requirements are not very, very clearly articulated or designed in the product. And that's what, if you understand this, that what is the employee looking at, right? From an attendance module perspective, what do I need to know? I'm an employee myself. So what do I need to know when I'm using this particular application? How does this build that transparency and autonomy around the attendance practices and policies of my organization within the organizational policy framework that I may have? Same goes for when the person who is supposed to collate or prepare attendance records. There is a lot of statutory requirements based on the industry that you are in. It could go deeper, but across industries, there are certain basic common statutory requirements that govern this module. How well your module is able to address those will be the key concern of this person who's sitting in the middle between the employee and the leadership team, right? And then the leadership team, what is the leadership team looking at? Right. Let me give you an example. In one of the customers, when I was working with an HR tech organization, we've been running their leave and attendance application for ages, right? And there was a conversation about, hey, why are we paying you for this, and da 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 da. We actually went back to them and presented them simple analysis of the data, saying that, hey, here is a list of your chronic absentee people. They tend to have a pattern of absenteeism that is very, very different from normal employees, right? Or your regular employees. Now, these are chronic absentee cases, and here is the data behind it. Please take a look at what's happening there. Is there a genuine problem, or are they disengaged, or whatever? Here is a list of your managers which typically do not approve transactions that are pending with them just before the payroll cutoff, which is again a reality in all organizations, right? Now, again, get this list of, take a look at this list of managers and figure out what you want to do. Now, that as an input going back to the senior HR team was the kind of value that they were expecting from the system. But if you were sitting there and saying that, hey, you know what, my attendance system is working fine, the biometric integration is working fine, my DAO is showing 90% or plus, and I'm doing a great job, but actually that was not the case. The buyer, the person who was paying for it, was not still seeing any value unless you created certain interesting data insights for them out of that. So that's where I think understanding each of these personas and their needs and requirements from the system will go into detail. And of course, then that brings us to the next piece as to what are the jobs to be done by each of these personas using a leave and attendance model.
Let's move to the next slide.
Yeah. And I think I like the way Mausmi has been able to put this together in terms of what is the situation, what is the motivation, and what is the expected outcome in that particular context. So if you look at it and if you're able to articulate it in this fashion, I think it will make it very, very simple and clearer for you as well. And we've tried to put some examples there. If you have any more examples, you can put it out there. But understanding this, a lot of times we give in an attendance and leave experience perspective, how easy it is for me to apply for leave. What information do I need when I'm applying for leave? Uh, and if you look at it from that perspective, then a bunch of possibilities actually start to emerge. Because if we are looking at each individual as a responsible adult professional, nobody, if the system tells you that, hey, you know what, Amol, 50% of your project team is on leave during this period when I'm going to apply for a leave, it is likely that Amol will rethink, hey, you know
Of
what? Oh,
course.
oh my God, maybe this is not a good time for me to take leave, because 50% of the team is already on leave. Not a great time. Customer is breathing down our neck, and so on and so forth. So if you look at it from that perspective, I think then you would be able to create those solutions within the product, and that is where the outcomes and the experience both get enhanced. Connecting this
Absolutely.
back to the first 2x2 chart that we showed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then of course, then this, I just actually let the cat out of the bag from an employee perspective, that how do I, attendance calendar is a simple way of showing what my attendance looks like. Most of the times, because this is, again, like I said, connected to payroll, most people are interested in knowing, hey, what's my payday is going to look like. Have I been marked late? How many times have I been marked late? How is that going to impact? Has my leave been approved by my manager? Is it considered? Da da da. So they may have a bunch of questions that they want to answer before even those questions arise. So your system should be able to answer those questions effectively. And of course, some of the things that I spoke about earlier, I think from a HR tech systems perspective, what I have seen so far, and there is a huge amount of work that I think HR tech players, with at least within India, I would say have to do, is on the HR head piece. In terms of being able to turn this very simplistic data that you have into insights that are useful for a senior professional, like a head of HR or a HR manager, is something that many HR tech companies are currently falling short. Right?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. So
And as an employee, if I may say so, the first thing I would always check is what are the holidays in the year and how many are long holidays. And as an employer, I would like to know, okay, these are all like long weekends, Friday holiday or a Monday holiday. This is going to be a very high holiday time. So I kind of, if I know that, I kind of plan in advance that, okay, so I need to be careful how many people are applying for leave, who will be the backup. Like we cannot have the entire team taking leaves. How do I balance it? And these are like very different perspective of exactly the same time frame. That's
absolutely.
what you were talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a simple thing, like I said, like chronic absenteeism, uh,
Yeah,
continuous
very, very.
absenteeism, right?
And that could be such an important thing to look at, because it's possible that that particular employee might be disengaged and about to leave. Maybe if you reach out to them in advance, you could stop that churn
Yeah,
of your employee.
absolutely. No, and see, the other thing is that in terms of even people who've not taken a leave,
That's also bad.
right? So those that it's the data is out there, right? I mean, I'm using your system for the last 3 years. Now, what do I get? Do I get a 3-year trend? Do I get a pattern of absenteeism that is across geographies, across business units, across role types? I mean, if you look at it from that perspective and then say that, hey, you know what, I would want to build those outcomes because it helps a particular job that this person is looking to solve, because they are doing this analysis somewhere
Of
otherwise. They're
course.
not even thought about this, but once you present that information in that shape and format to them, they're obviously going to
That becomes
like it,
valuable.
right? That
Yes,
becomes
yes,
absolutely
absolutely.
valuable.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that takes me to the next slide, metrics and tracking, Amol.
Yeah, and again, if you there's a bunch of data there, I would leave that for you guys to look at. But I think we've already talked about when you start looking at it in this context of this framework, what we are talking about, then I think the matrices will emerge on their own, because when you immerse yourself in the shoes of a senior HR leader, or in the shoes of a person whose job is to collate attendance and provide accurate data on a month-on-month basis for the purpose of uh, payroll processing, then you will actually start looking at, hence, what is the metric that I need to measure, hence, what product outcomes I need to give, which job I'm helping this person do, and so on and so forth. So, by the way, Maushmi, I'm also watchful of the time.
Yeah, yeah.
We,
I was
we have
also
one
looking at the
more,
time.
yeah, we have one more thing to do with hopeful participation from the gang. So maybe we'll take another 10 minutes to finish off the next one, and then we'll keep another 10 minutes for some Q&A.
Yeah, yeah. Or we can start the Q&A with the next slide. So when we are going through, when me and Amol, we were working on this slide, there was so much that we wanted to put, but we had to be like very cognizant of not putting too much, because metrics are also, sometimes you end up doing overloaded loading of metrics. So we
Yeah.
were trying to be very careful about the most important things. Of course, there could be many more in the context of the kind of business or customers you have. So feel free to add more things. This is not the entire universe. This is just like we are just starting to create a concept where we are able to explain how to get through this.
Yeah. I
So
think, yeah,
yes,
I'll
Amol.
just take two questions. There are two interesting
Mhm.
questions from an anonymous attendee. Uh,
Okay.
but those are interesting questions. I'll pick them up right.
Sure, please go ahead.
Question one is, how frequently do you need to revisit customer
Oh,
outcomes? And question two is, and both are, I think, linked. So I'll just read the questions first, and then I'll answer. And Maushmi, feel free to add to that.
absolutely.
The second question is, shouldn't we focus on the company or business outcomes instead of persona-based outcomes? So I think I'll answer the second one first. The persona that we're talking about is actually a role in the context of the organization.
Yes.
And in the context of the organization, the role has been designed to do certain things and deliver certain outcomes. So there is a design that exists, and then there is an individual which is occupying that role, which may either perform above that design outcome or under that designed outcome, right? With technology, what actually most businesses are expecting to do is to ensure that the role then delivers at minimum to the designed out expectations. And hence, a lot of times, and this is very true in HR. I'm sure it is true in other domains as well. But in HR, it becomes very, very critical for us to then position the product in a way which says that, hey, you know what, this is hence person agnostic, and whatever is the designed outcome that you expect from this role, the software is actually coming in and delivering that, so that the person's ability to pull up and build and design and deliver to that is that much more lesser, right? And hence, that's the biggest benefit that you can give to the business. The person then can choose to design and deliver outcomes which are more than that. The second piece is how frequent. I really don't have a good answer to this. It depends on how quickly you are evolving as a product and how quickly your customers are evolving, right? Because uh, I'll again, from an HR tech perspective, you will see that there are companies which only focus on, I'll not take names of any specific vendor, but there are companies that you would see in the market which only focus on, let's say, saying that I will just do leave, attendance, and payroll. And they're
Mhm.
doing great job about that, right? They have tens of thousands of customers there. But the biggest set, so there are other set of companies which then say that, hey, you know what, I do leave attendance and payroll, great, but I also give you performance management, learning management, not at an enterprise level, but at a SMB level. And these companies are losing a lot of their customers to this next set of players, because the customer has now evolved, their needs have evolved. And while you did an excellent job of solving their outcomes, and you also gave them a great experience in doing so, they're still going to churn because their outcomes themselves have now transformed and you're no longer able to meet those outcomes, right? And hence customers are churning away from those companies to another company, which is then saying that, hey, you know what, I'm an SMB focused HR tech, which gives you end to end, which does a great job of leave attendance and payroll, but also gives you something extra. A lot of times, however, what you would also see, then the customers move from this player to that, they will still expect the same level of outcomes being delivered on leave attendance and payroll from this next generation of applications. And that's where then their ability to uh, deliver those outcomes will get questioned. So I hope that answers your question, the anonymous attendee.
I would like to add two things here. Okay, company does not tell me the outcome. There is somebody sitting there, right, whose job is in that business to achieve those outcomes. So that person has a certain role in that business to play, whether it is an HR head or an HR recruiter or HR payroll manager. That person is responsible for the customer outcomes. And of course, as a vendor, when I am selling a tool to them, they will tell me this is what we need to achieve. Basically, a job of any tool is to make the life of the person who's using your tool, make it easier and make them successful. So whatever customer outcomes are basically the outcomes of these individuals who are actually using my tool. So they're not very different. They are just another way of distilling it in 3 or 4 different personas who are all interacting with my tool. So overall business, yes, overall business wants a lot of things. But what are these specific people wanting? Because if you make those people successful, they are the people who are going to pay. So they need to get successful. So their outcomes, of course, should be aligned with the business outcome. And that's how, that's why persona becomes so very important. And it's not nothing new. Marketing works on personas, buyer persona, sales works on personas. So customer success should also adopt this highly proven concept into our own working and define our outcomes based on personas. The second question, of course, customer outcomes. I mean, Amol has answered it very eloquently. What I try to do in my business is every time we have a customer meeting, whether we are meeting them monthly or quarterly, I would bring their outcomes again on the table and say, listen, you told me this is what you wanted to achieve. Is there anything that has changed or added? And most of the time, they would have one outcome on day one. When you have achieved that, they would have another target. Then you have achieved that, they have another thing to achieve. So it's always moving and changing. So it's important to understand, because then your renewal keeps moving and the new expectations is understood. It's like, once you pass your 10th, then you have to again go and sit for exams and do your 12th, and then something else and something else. Studying never ends. So the outcome expectation also never ends. That's how it is. Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful.
Mausmi,
Yes,
just
Amol.
a time check, because we have just 10
Yeah,
more
yeah.
minutes left on the clock. I think what we'll do is then just quickly go to the next one and
Sure.
uh, yeah.
So let's move forward. We what we plan to do is, I'm just moving these slides. Is the first slide, of course, it's repeated again. What we wanted to do was, we've already done attendance module and we've shown you how it works. So now what we want to do is do recruitment module. And I hope we can have some participation from the audience. If you're listening, please feel free to, raise your hand or just write on the chat. And let's go through these modules while from recruitment module on the same framework. Yes, Amol.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, what I would say is that we'll give you a minute. Just look at the framework, and you can try and put your perspective using this framework and say that okay, these are the customer outcomes, these are the outcomes by personas, these are the jobs that they want done, and so on and so forth. We'll give you a minute to do that. You can post your answers in the chat window or in the Q&A window, and then we'll look at those. We of course have created this for the recruitment area, but I think given the time paucity, we just have another 8 minutes on the clock, and I don't think we'll be able to run through them in detail. So what we'll do is maybe we'll share this deck with the participants.
Of course.
And post the call. So anyways, you can go through them in detail. But essentially, I'll just talk about a few things from a recruitment perspective again. One of the biggest areas of investment in HR tech today is, and I think I've been tracking investments in HR tech for about 7-8 years now. And recruitment or talent acquisition remains to be one of the biggest areas of investment in HR tech from a VC investment perspective. Yet, if I ask any HR or TA head saying that, hey, you know what, you've invested so much in HR tech, or there's so much of VC investment happening in TA tech, are all your problems solved? And the answer even today is no. And the reason for that is, I think there are very siloed applications which look at solving only a particular problem, and there are applications like specific job boards. I again not name ones, but they've been just solving the same problem for now decades. Problem has changed. Problem has drastically changed, yet that particular job board is still doing what it did maybe 10 years, 15 years ago. And that puts a lot of challenges downstream. The downstream applications, like a typical ATS application, also is largely focused on digitizing the process and not really focused on improving specific outcomes, and hence how do I facilitate that process. There are a few exceptions to that, of course, but that's why I think there is a huge opportunity. So the way I see this is a huge opportunity for any of the incumbent HR tech players, or anybody who is even thinking of building an HR tech application. There's a huge opportunity that is available for us to look at it in this perspective. And if you do this well, then of course you would get a lot of traction from the market. So with that, I think I'll leave the last 5 minutes for any question answers that anyone would have. Or Mausmi, if you want to just, I don't know, whether we'll have time. Do you think time to go through the slides quickly?
I think what we can do is, I ask the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to write on the chat. I have lots of questions. So I am going to start asking my questions to Amol. And if there are any questions that pop up, we'll pick that up. So, what I wanted to do was, Amol, when you started talking about recruitment module, and you have such deep understanding of, HR tech. So when we were working on this, like when you put this together, outcome by persona, and you have used this framework. So how have you structured this is what I want to understand.
Yeah, so I think when I look at this, and you can go to the next slide for that, in terms of when you look at any particular process, like in a recruitment process also, while these three personas are by default are going to be there, like I said, a lot of times when I look at a particular application, an ATS, for example, is heavily created from a perspective of a recruiter. Yet the biggest challenge for most ATSs is adoption of the platform by the recruiter themselves.
Oh.
Right. And that then opens up the conversation in terms of, okay, so what am I doing here and how am I doing? And if you understand how this particular application is ideally supposed to operate, and how well this application understands what challenges the recruiter is facing. And mind you, again, like I said, that there is a designed expectation of the job the designed expectation of the job would change from industry to industry, depending on the maturity of the organization and so on. And there will be an individual who is performing that role. Now, that person may or may not be currently skilled and capable to deliver to that designed expectation. And hence, what happens is when you introduce a tool, the person is going to look at it as something that would either help her or him, or is something that is going to take their job away. With a lot of this AI talk, that's another fear that
Yeah.
come in, right? And that then builds the resistance. But if you build from there and then say that, okay, hence what is the job that the recruiter is looking to do, and then we can maybe go to the next slide, then it kinds of starts giving you those answers. And that's where I think if you structure your thoughts to follow this methodology, at least I have seen that it gives you a lot of clarity. Or even if you don't have, then it at least tells you that, okay, this is what I don't know, or this is what I want to understand. And then you can go and sit down with a recruiter saying that, tell me, okay, what is the jobs that you do? How do you do it? Can I sit in? I mean, I find it amazing that not many product managers of HR tech companies have ever sat with these end users. I mean,
Wow.
ask this question that, okay, you're a product manager, you do a payroll product. Do you actually sit with payroll admins at least once in a year to observe them in their work environment?
And that is so important. I mean, that is the basis of being able to ask the right questions. And then, of course, making sure everything else, product, marketing, sales, and more importantly, the CS team is able to deliver the right outcomes to the customer. But that understanding starts at the forefront, isn't it, with the product?
Correct. Yeah. And then if you understand that, then designing them and building them into your product outcomes, converting them into matrices and tracking mechanisms, and then figuring out, okay, how do I then show these metrics to whom, in what shape and format, becomes very, very simple. And I think that's where I say that I see this as a huge opportunity in the HR tech space. Because traditionally, I mean, I started making use of tech in HR about 15, 16 years ago. That time, the focus was simply on digitizing the process. And it pains me that in 15 years hence, the focus is largely still there. There's very little insights, very little intelligence that most HR tech applications are able to give to me just by digitizing that process today, which in my mind, the tools to be able to do that from a tech perspective are there. I'm not even talking about AI, ML, and chat GPTs and any of the fancy things that have come in the last year or so. I'm just talking about basics of data and tech capabilities that have been existing for at least a decade now. I think there's a huge opportunity for the CS community of HR tech to use this simplistic framework and take this and push their products forward into that direction, which is going to be a great thing if that happens.
I also believe, Amol, while we were going through that, all the data points that you are asking, they already exist in the tool, right? They are already being captured, a lot of them. But the point is, they are not being presented in a way that somebody can consume and understand what this product outcome is. So it's there. You have that information. It's just a matter of putting some calculations around and representing it in the right visualization.
Absolutely. It actually that's what I mean. It goes down to the ability and willingness of the CS person to dig in and say that, okay, let me figure this out. And I think,
yes,
yeah, I agree with you that maybe in 70 to 80% of the cases you will find that the particular functionality exists, the particular data exists. I just have to figure out a way to bring that out, in a
yes.
particular way. Yeah.
And it has to be automation. It's not practically feasible to do it like somebody gives you a download and do it in Excel. It's very hard.
Absolutely.
On a regular basis.
Correct.
So it has to be an automation, but I do believe a lot of it is there. It's just a matter of putting the right, story and perspective on the table.
Absolutely.
So let's go to product outcomes, and we'll very quickly go to metrics and leave it. Let people discover, read through. We'll share this. Feel free to share with your colleagues and friends as well. We want as many people to understand this framework and start using it. The objective is that we really, really need to, as a group of people, be aware of how product outcomes are and how we can empower customer success people to be able to do this, and hopefully this makes their job a little easier.
Yeah, I think one of the simplest things from a product outcome perspective is, again, talking about a recruitment ATS, right? If I'm a recruiter and I'm using this, if the ATS starts telling me how am I doing versus other set of recruiters that exist in the environment, not just within my company, but maybe even outside my company, within my industry, and so on and so forth, it just brings in that competitiveness, and recruiters, like salespeople, are extremely competitive.
Yes.
They because their job is very similar to the sales guys, that they get paid on closures, or they get measured on closures, right? And that's why very most good recruiters are extremely competitive, and using that to the advantage of the product and driving the product outcome is, I think, a very great way of building that particular outcome and tying that back to the matrices that are built into the product. So we've talked about some of those here, and
Yeah.
the next one, yeah,
Yes.
that's the metrics. Then you look at it saying that, okay, where am I, convert this into some sort of a leaderboard, gamify this. I mean, there's tons of things, like I said,
Yes.
can be done, which exist technologically. It is possible. You are collecting this data,
In
this.
your software, of course. It's a lot. I know the slide has a lot of content, and it's not possible within like a minute to consume it. So we would, of course, Shivam would share this to all the attendees, and we would also be sharing it online along with the recording. And I would really hope that some of you take this back and try to apply this in your business. And if you have any questions, me and Amol, we are available. Please feel free. You can drop us messages on LinkedIn. Shivam, if you can share, some LinkedIn Connects options, please feel free to
Yeah.
ask questions, go through it. And, we'll try to democratize this concept as much as possible, because I think this is gold in my opinion. So it needs to reach as many people as they can, and feel free to share with your friends, with your groups, because I think this should empower customer success people in HR Tech, and hopefully HR Tech becomes much more capable up to Amol's standards.
No, I mean, like I said, this is something that I absolutely love doing. And I'm not saying that I'm an expert in this. Like I said at the beginning, I have more through trying and failing than succeeding, right? And I'm happy that I could share some of that with all of you today. And thank you once again, Mausmi and the ZapScale team, for giving me this opportunity. And I hope for all of you who attended, this was useful. Uh, once you have this, if you have any further follow-up questions, more than happy to jump on a call with you and help you with this.
Or if you have any more ideas to add here, and if you think we missed something, that is very important. As Amol said in the beginning, we really want to learn. So if you think we have missed something and something needs to be added, please ask us questions. Let's all build this knowledge together and make it extremely useful for all of us. And thank you very much for all the people who've joined and were here for an hour. And hopefully you had some value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amol and Mosmi, and thank you for everyone for attending the webinar. If you have any other questions, please contact our panelists. As Mosmi said, all the contact details I have given in the chat box. Also, once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would really appreciate if you would complete that and provide your feedback. It really helps us to organize better webinars for all of you guys. If you'd like to watch the recording of the webinar, I am just typing the YouTube channel of ZapScale here. The video will be uploaded tomorrow. So please do subscribe to our channel, because we are coming up with another webinar on 1st of February. So yeah, do you have anything else to add, Mosmi, Amol?
No, I think the audience is pretty quiet today, very selective
We've got a
audience.
shy audience here.
Yeah, so that's okay. It's all right. But I think this Amol, I think this concept here that we've put together is extremely valuable, and we should talk more about this. That's what I feel like. It's more and more people, and probably with more inputs from a lot of people, we'd be able to polish and refine as we go along, and this becomes something which can actually bring a lot of value to every vertical, not just HR tech.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I love to do this for the HR tech vertical because that's something that gives me a lot of
Of
energy.
course. And
And
it really helped me, because you, with your deep understanding of HR tech, we were able to, put this so nicely together. I really enjoyed the
thank you,
entire
thank you.
structuring of it. Thanks, Amol. Thanks a lot for taking out so much time for this webinar.
No worries, no worries. It was a pleasure doing this, and I'll look forward to the another opportunity to do something similar.
Absolutely, absolutely. We need to build more on this. Thanks, Amol. Thanks, Shivam. Thanks a lot. And thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye. Good night.
Bye bye.